Not so long ago, my wardrobe used to look like this. I shopped constantly, I wasted money on clothes I barely wore, and no matter what I put on, I never felt quite confident or put together in my outfits. But today, my wardrobe looks completely different. I shop way less, I wear almost everything I own, and getting dressed has become one of the easiest parts of my day. And it wasn't because I bought more clothes, it was actually because I started following a handful of rules that completely changed the way I shop and the way I get dressed. Stop buying the same outfit over and over again. In case you haven't already noticed, which you probably have, I'm a millennial, which means that for most of my adult life, skinny jeans were pretty much the only type of trousers I wore. They were basically my entire personality. And if you would have asked me 5 years ago to try straight leg or wide leg trousers, I probably would have laughed because I genuinely thought they looked terrible on me. But of course, after years of wearing the same silhouette, I started to feel that I was stuck in a style rut. Because even though I owned a lot of clothes, I had very little variety, and I was always reaching out for the same formula, which was a pair of skinny jeans, some sort of loose top or sweater, and ankle boots. And that's when I realized it was time to step out of my comfort zone and experiment with new silhouettes, like straight leg jeans, wide leg trousers, maxi skirts, anything that wasn't my usual skinny jeans. And if I'm being honest, at first, they all felt wrong, but after many trials, I realized that they didn't look wrong. They just looked different, and I just wasn't used to seeing myself in them. And once I started incorporating these new silhouettes into my wardrobe, the way I got dressed completely changed. Because I no longer had to build every outfit around skinny jeans, I suddenly had much more options, and getting dressed stopped feeling repetitive and started to feel like something I actually enjoyed. So if you've ever felt like no matter what, all of your outfits always look the same, don't try to solve the problem by buying another version of something you already own. Sometimes all you need is to try a new silhouette. Stop judging clothes by how they look and start paying attention to how they're made. A few years ago, I really didn't pay that much attention to what my clothes were made of. If I liked something and it fit my budget, that was good enough for me. But after a while, I started noticing a pattern. Some of the clothes that looked great in store looked terrible after just a few wears, like sweaters that started to peel excessively or lost their shape, or tops that will hold on to odors no matter how many times I washed them. And that's when I realized I needed to stop judging clothes solely by how they look, and I needed to pay attention to what they're made of. Now, one of the very first things I do before I buy anything is check the composition label, and I try to avoid synthetic fibers as much as possible. So if a garment doesn't really need to have synthetics in its composition and it's mostly made from things like acrylic or polyester, I simply don't buy it. And instead, I try to look for natural fibers like silk, wool, or cotton whenever it makes sense. And that's exactly why I'm partnering with LILYSILK for this portion of the video. I've actually been buying from LILYSILK for years now, long before they ever reach out, and I genuinely think it is a great place if you're looking to buy clothes made from natural fibers like silk or cashmere. So I thought I would show you some of my recent favorites, starting with this off-the-shoulder silk cashmere top. This is made from a blend of silk and cashmere, so it is incredibly soft against the skin, and it's also one of those pieces that keeps you warm while still being lightweight. And if you watched my channel before, you probably know that I love an off-the-shoulder top, and I'm really a fan of this asymmetrical neckline because it elongates the neck and it highlights the collarbone without being overly revealing. And I've been loving pairing it with these pleated trousers in this beautiful berry brown shade. These are made from a mulberry silk crepe, so they have this beautiful drape. And honestly, they are the perfect example of why I started experimenting with different silhouettes. A few years ago, I probably wouldn't have even tried a style like this, and now it's become one of my favorites because I love how it cinches at the waist and then it skims the hips before falling into a straight leg, which I just find incredibly flattering. Next, I have this silk maxi skirt with a flared hem, and I actually own a few silk skirts in my wardrobe, but this one immediately stood out because of the fabric. It is made from a heavier double-faced silk charmeuse, which gives it this luxurious texture and a really beautiful drape. Plus, it is a really versatile piece that goes with pretty much anything in my wardrobe. I also want to call out their cashmere because it is incredibly soft, and I have this drop shoulder sweater as an example. This is probably one of the softest pieces in my wardrobe. It is made from 100% brushed cashmere, which gives it this slightly fussy, almost cloud-like texture. And it's also great if you have sensitive skin. I do have sensitive skin, and I find that I can wear this comfortably directly against my skin without any irritation, and that is quite rare for me, especially with wool. And finally, I have this beautiful two-tone cashmere sweater. This is also made from 100% brushed cashmere, but what really stood out to me was the two-tone heather yarn. It is quite subtle, but it actually combines shades of sky blue and lavender with gray tones, which gives the sweater much more depth, and it makes it feel a little bit more interesting than a classic solid knit. So if you're trying to build a wardrobe with fewer, better pieces made from natural fibers, I can highly recommend LILYSILK, and they're currently running their anniversary sale, so if you've had your eye on the brand, it is a great time to pick up something. And as always, I will leave all of these pieces linked in the description box down below, and thank you LILYSILK for partnering with me for this portion of the video. Wear colors that naturally work for you. The next thing that completely changed the way I got dressed was understanding color. And I know that color analysis has gotten huge over the last couple of years, but I actually have a bit of a controversial opinion when it comes to it. I honestly think it's one of those things that can be really helpful until it isn't. Because somewhere along the way, it went from understanding a few basic principles to trying to figure out which of the 12 color seasons you belong to. And one thing I've noticed with color analysis is that most palettes include a version of most colors. So if you're cool toned, for example, your seasonal palette might still include a cooler version of yellow that's supposed to work for you, even though yellow is an inherently warm color. And that's where I think things get a little bit more complicated than they need to be. Instead, I found it much more helpful to just focus on two things. First, are you naturally warm-toned or cool-toned? And second, what are the inherently warm and the inherently cool colors? I actually came across this idea from another content creator whose video I will link in the description box down below because she explained this perfectly. But she was basically saying that while you can find warmer and cooler versions of most colors, it is more helpful to focus on the temperature of the base color. Think about colors like yellow and blue for a moment. Yes, you can find warmer blues and you can find cooler yellows, but yellow will always be an inherently warm color and blue will always be an inherently cool color. So even the coolest yellow will never be as cool as a color like blue. And that really changed things for me because instead of trying to find the perfect version of every color, I just focus on those colors that naturally harmonize with my features. For example, knowing that I leaned cool tone, instead of trying to make warmer colors like orange or yellow work for me, I now just focus on cool colors like navy, charcoal, or shades of blue. Buy slower. When I first decided to rebuild my wardrobe a few years ago, I honestly thought I needed all of the so-called wardrobe staples. You know the drill. A trench coat, a classic white shirt, a white t-shirt, a pair of loafers. The list goes on. And if I'm honest, I was really tempted to get all of these things at once, but looking back, I'm really glad I didn't. Because the truth is, I didn't need most of these items, and you probably don't as well. And what I've realized instead is that your wardrobe will tell you exactly what it needs if you just give it enough time. For example, for the longest time, I had a black blazer at the top of my wish list because it's one of those things that everyone says it's a wardrobe staple. But as I was rebuilding my wardrobe, I noticed something interesting. Whenever I was getting dressed, I never found myself wishing I had a black blazer. Instead, I would think, I really wish I had a pair of white flats, or a pair of navy trousers would look amazing with this outfit. And that's when I realized those were the real gaps in my wardrobe, not a black blazer. And I've never would have figured that out if I would have bought everything from my wish list on day one. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned since rebuilding my wardrobe. It is not something that happens overnight. It is something that actually takes time. So if you take something away from this video, let it be this. Great style isn't about buying more clothes. It's about being intentional with the ones you choose.